Yes, go ahead.
Okay. So welcome. I'm here to talk to you about Ventripoint. I'm going to go through it pretty quickly because I think a number of people have heard the story before. We've had a wonderful year so far. It's only 3.5 months out, but we're up 600%. We got rid of all our debt and we have 2 years of cash in the bank, and the liquidity continues to be excellent. Trading this week, we've been doing $2 or $3 million a day in liquidity. So it's easy to get in and out of the stock. So on the highest level, we are an artificial intelligence company. We licensed a piece of artificial intelligence from the University of Washington in Seattle back in 2005, and we've been working on making that work better and better. So we were an AI company before AI was fashionable, I guess. And we now have that working extremely well, so that we can accurately and reliably measure the function of the heart, all 4 chambers of the heart. The product is on its 3rd generation already, and it's approved for sale in the US, Canada, Europe, and China. And so we have our first 16 sites up and running and using the equipment, and we hope to do a lot more but COVID obviously is limiting our ability to get these machines, which primarily would go into hospitals. 2D echo is used worldwide. There's over 4 million 2D ultrasound machines out in the world. So if you have a heart problem, you'll be examined using 2D ultrasound anywhere you go. Unfortunately, 2D ultrasound doesn't give you volumetric information, doesn't give you 3D information, only gives you 2D information. And the volumetric information is often important in really figuring out what's wrong with your heart, especially the right side of the heart, which is particularly hard to view using conventional 2D ultrasound and near impossible to view using 3D ultrasound. So the gold standard is MRI. It's hard to get an MRI. It takes time to get an MRI. And more importantly, it's no fun. It takes you an hour to 2 hours in the machine. You have to lie motionless. Most adults have to be sedated. Children have to be anesthetized. And you have to be injected with contrast media and hold your breath every time they want to take a picture. And so we give you the same information using conventional 2D ultrasound. And one of the biggest upgrade from version 2 to version 3 of our system has been allowing the patient to move around completely during the collection of the images during the scanning. So that's a major upgrade, convenience factor for the patient and the clinician. So this is our current version. It's a mobile stand with a computer. The magic's all in the software and in this tracking system. So we now have a patent pending new tracking system, which we can now use, which doesn't, soon will have no magnetic components to it whatsoever. And so it'll be useful in people that have pacemakers and defibrillators. So we track where the probe is. We capture the images that are on a conventional 2D ultrasound machine. We're agnostic, we don't care. We hook up to anybody's machine. So we're not asking people to buy a new ultrasound machine, which cardiac machines run anywhere from $250,000 to $350,000 US. We don't ask them to buy a new machine. They just have to buy our machine for $50,000 or lease it, and then they can get 3-dimensional information equivalent to MRI. So this is what 2D images look like for your heart. If you're a cardiologist, you would recognize where the right heart was, where the left heart was, where the atrium was, where the ventricles are. But what we do there, and sometimes it's hard to figure out what you're actually looking at, even if you're a cardiologist, because sometimes you know exactly where the sonographer took the images, what view. A standard cardiac echo exam is 16 views through 4 acoustic windows. So you end up with 16 pictures. You're not 100% sure where they all came from, and some of them are blurry and some of them are not. But we're able to take that information that is in those. Wouldn't you know it, Anthony? I didn't check the video to make sure it was working.
So is it not working?
Yeah, well, that looked like it's not working. Yeah, let's try a different version here. Life is like that sometimes. I think this version doesn't matter what you do. It's always the thing you don't check, right? There you go.
Of course. There you go.
Okay. So standard view is 16 views through 4 acoustic windows. So those are the 16 views you get. we're going to show you how we do reconstruction. So in every view would have a little bit of information about, but not every chamber is present in every view. So we're going to do the right ventricle here because, as I said, that's the hardest one to do. We have a template. So you bring the template over, you size it and rotate it, and then you put on dots. The dots allow us you to pick the very best sites in that view that you're sure exactly where the wall is or where the valve is or where the apex of the heart is. And so if it's too blurry, you just don't put the dots on because you don't want that. But if you can find spots which are really clear, then you put these dots on. And then we have accumulated over the last 10 years, databases of all 4 chambers of the heart, of normal hearts and misshapen hearts, and it goes in and creates a model of what that chamber looks like. In this case, the right ventricle. So you can see the yellow lines shows you in all 16 views where it shows up. Sometimes it's not in the view, exactly where the ventricle is, and sometimes it's hanging off the edge like this, but you're able to see it. So you end up with a model of what the right ventricle looks like. You can see it's kind of a funny shape, and it's, you could never calculate the volume of that using some kind of a formula. And you get it both as the end systolic and diastolic, full and empty. And so the difference between the solid and the mesh here is which part of the heart is moving and where the blood's coming from. And of course, the difference in volume is the ejection fraction. One thing you can go in and interrogate the reconstruction. I want to see this one area here where there's virtually no information, like that part just never, even in this study, which is pretty clear images, just didn't get any information about the back part of the right ventricle here. But the system is quite able to fill in the gaps and and give you an accurate shape and volume of that chamber, in spite of the fact that you didn't actually get any scans in that area. Let's show you another example here for the left atrium. Left atriums are becoming much more important. We're now seeing a number of studies correlating the volume and ejection fraction of the left atrium to all sorts of things. And if we have time today, I'd love to talk about some of that because it's emerging science and medicine, which I think we should all be aware about. Anyway, you can see the left atrium looks more like a lemon. And if it's not, and this particular left atrium is more or less normal. Actually, the last right ventricle was normal too. This is a normal heart. This is not a diseased heart we're showing you here. But again, you can see these yellow lines, borders, which shows you exactly where the heart is in the plane. It shows you where the plane is in the heart. And from that information, you can get accurate information. So we give you all the same information you get from an MRI, but more importantly, you get it in 5 minutes of scanning and a few minutes of analysis. Heart disease is still a king-size problem worldwide, even more of a problem outside of North America than inside. And we focused on right ventricle applications like congenital heart disease. So if you're born with a heart problem, it's always the right side of your heart. And so we and the guidelines say you should be scanned, have your right heart, the volume of your right heart calculated every 3 months for the rest of your life. Of course, the only way to do that right now, before we came along, was MRI. Nobody's going to stick a child, an infant, even an adult in an MRI every 3 months. So it's impossible to achieve the goals of the guidelines from the American Society of Echocardiography and the American Heart Association and the American College of Cardiologists and the European College of Cardiologists all have the same guidelines, and the Canadian as well, actually. You can't achieve the guidelines. They put that in there because they knew our technology was coming and they knew they would have the ability to do this. And so now they can achieve the guidelines. Pulmonary hypertension is, if you have problems with your lungs, you get back pressure on the right side of your heart. It's hard for the blood to push through your lungs and over to the left side. We're seeing this in spades with COVID patients now, get lung congestion. We're seeing 60% of patients having heart problems and actually dying from right heart failure. And we'll see the same problem in when you have chemotherapy. The drugs you use to treat the cancer also attack destroy the ability of the heart muscle to function, because the right side is a very small, thin, paper thin muscle compared to the left side. The left side can sustain quite a bit of damage and still go on functioning. The right side, if it gets any kind of damage, is just struggling. So most of the problems in chemotherapy are right heart problems. Again, we're now seeing that guidelines call for people to, after they've been through chemotherapy, to go see a cardiologist and them to be scanned every 3 to 6 months, because sometimes these effects of the drugs turn up, years after. We were able to take advantage of the window between the first wave and the second wave of COVID to get some devices into top hospitals in all these different, for all these different applications. So Erasmus is a general hospital. They're using it for all comers. Houston, MD Anderson is top cancer hospital in the world. They're using it on cancer patients. Sick Kids is using it obviously on children, the CHD, and although they've now turned Sick Kids into an adult hospital because we don't have enough beds, acute care beds anywhere in Ontario to deal with all the adults with COVID. So that's an interesting little sidelight. Peter Monk's adult hospital next door to Sick Kids, they have one for, again, PH, coronary heart disease, congenital heart disease, and general. And King's College in London is a COVID center, or UK COVID, and so they're using it on COVID patients. And the next one's going into Glenfield, where Dr. Skinner was. Dr. Skinner was on Biopub about 2.5 weeks ago. I really encourage you to go at least listen to the segment, the 10-minute to 20-minute piece of that Biopub presentation. You can ask Anthony for the link if you haven't already gotten it, and listen to a user who's been using the equipment for 5 years talk about all the value it does. He has it. His center's been turned into a COVID center, so he's not only going to use it now on children, but also on adult COVID patients. So go to market is get in the hands of the key opinion leaders, which we've done in all those hospitals. For example, Dr. Monahan at King's College is the convener of the annual conference on echocardiography in Europe called EuroEcho. So he's the head guy there. And so he'll be talking about his experience with our equipment next time they have that conference, which would still likely be virtual this year. Big market, $2 billion market just for oncology, pulmonary hypertension, and congenital heart disease. Add COVID to this, probably double it. Put in China, you can triple it, and then add some other diseases, which I hope we're going to get a chance. You sell it for $50,000 outside of the United States because most places in the world just buy their equipment and use it. They're not used to paying on a per use basis. The U.S. model is more on a. We have a reimbursement code for the procedure. So for 5 minutes work, you can get paid anywhere from $100 to $200, and more importantly, you get better data. So we now are leasing it for $15,000 a year and charging $50 a case. And that's a much better revenue model for us over time, because you have a recurring revenue every year. We build the machines for $5,000. So leasing it for $15,000 upfront gives us 3 times our money right out of the gate. But more importantly, an average center would use the machine to the total of about $50,000 to $60,000 a year. So we would get $50,000 to $60,000 a year every year out of the device, as opposed to $50,000 once. We do have a consumable for the procedure, which we would have to, which would be a small fee, relatively small fee for each procedure in the capital model. So it's out, it's working. We anticipate when COVID settles down. I know echocardiography services worldwide are running at 10 to 20% normal. And even though people are doing as emergency cases, they're trying to get the scan done in under 10 minutes, conventional scan under 10 minutes. So they're only taking 4 or 5 views at most. They're just trying to not spend any more than 10 minutes with the patient, even though they're fully decked out in personal protective equipment. That's just what's going on right now. We have an animal model. We can talk idea. We're still working with the North Carolina State University Vet School. My 7th time around. I have a great team, and I think there are 3 major players in echocardiography. I mean, there's lots of people who make 2D ultrasound machines. Hundreds of people make 2D, but most of them are very low-end machines. You can look at, knees, elbows, kidneys, livers, babies. But to look at a heart, you need these $250,000, $350,000 pieces of equipment there, because heart's this dynamic thing moving constantly inside this beautiful echo chamber called a rib cage, and so it's very difficult to get good images, right? So. Just a second. I got people coming in here. Guys, I'm on a call, please. Okay, so GE has about 42% market share. Philips has 33%. Siemens has about 15%. There's only three major players in the echocardiography because you have to spend literally billions of dollars perfecting the equipment so it can be useful in cardiac. And they tend to buy everybody else. So we anticipate that. And so we have an alliance agreement that we're working on with one of the big three here. And we hope that we'll be able to announce a partnership, a marketing partnership with one of these three major players, and will give us access to their customer base and their sales force for our products. And we're still, last time I was on BioPub, I said it would be 30 to 60 days. That was 20 days ago. So I guess I'll be consistent and say it's going to be 10 to 40 days. We'll sometime in the next 10 to 40 days, we'll be announcing that alliance, I hope. So that's it. $2 billion market, high margins. Current valuation at 46 million US is a small fraction of what people typically would pay for these companies. Once COVID stops, once the hospitals can reopen after COVID, we have a number of machines that we'll be putting in right away and building that expert database. Happy to take questions.
Yeah, great. Thank you. And at this time, I'll definitely open the floor up to questions. If you have a question, we already have 3 in queue or a couple in queue right now. But if you have questions, please type them into the Q&A box. You have a lot of people on today. Hopefully we'll get a lot of good questions. For those of you who are on from Torrey Hills Capital, I just want to let you know that the code word today is Marlin, M-A-R-L-I-N. Yeah, we're going to open it up to questions. First question, George, you just, I guess, announced it. When do you accept or just talked about it, when do you accept the alliance to be announced, or are we still in a quote unquote out walking the elephant situation?
Yes, we're out walking the elephant. That's my analogy. You know, I mean, these big three are big elephants. It's a big organization, and I have lots of experience. You know, I've worked for DuPont and Pfizer and Boston Scientific and over the years, and acquisitions and agreements. So I know all these things have to go through all these different checkpoints in a big company because their reputation is their bread and butter, right? So you can't put out even any kind of a announcement without having, you know, regulatory, legal, marketing, everybody sign off on it. So
yeah,
we're in that lovely process of
dealing with
through that. Yeah. So you know, best guess based on my experience with these kind of companies is what I said, 10 to 40 days. You know, that's my best guess. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I've never worked for that particular company, so I don't know exactly what their process is, but most of them are similar.
Yeah, those bigger companies, it does take a while to get through, but once you do get through, it's really and get it announced, I think it's going to be a game changer for the company. Another question: Are you?
Obviously, I can't. You know, I have 2 or 3 salespeople, depending on how you characterize one of my people. You know, and I'm not going to sell 40,000 machines in Europe and North America with 3 people.
Yeah.
So I need a partner. Absolutely.
Of course. Absolutely. Especially, I think with some of the COVID long haulers, there's going to be a major need for this. Are you planning to update your economic analysis for the financial and personnel benefits to the hospital of using VMS 3.0 over the conventional approaches like MRI?
Yeah, I guess I'll go back to, so I can get back on this thing. This is much better, I think. How do we get you? How do I get me up here as the guy? Speaker. I'm talking, but are you seeing me, Anthony?
Yeah, I see you. Yep.
Full screen or just a little picture?
I see. I just see you. I see you in my box. But
okay. Perfect. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, what, you know, to sell into the United States and to do kind of mass sales to other jurisdictions, Europe and Canada, I mean, we need to do the economics and redo the. So we did that. We had an economic analysis done 10 years ago at Columbus Hospital Nationwide Hospital in Columbus, Ohio. Were kind enough to allow us into their databases, and we did an analysis, and the return on investment for getting a VMS machine at that time was under 2 months. But 10 years is a long time. So we want to redo that. So we're now interviewing, professional health economics companies to redo that analysis. We think it'll, the payback now on this, I think, as I said in one of my slides there, I think the payback on leasing the machine and paying on a per use basis will be under 2 or 3 weeks. So, at that point, we would like to have that hard data to go to when we emerge here from COVID, to be able to go to hospitals and say, this machine pays for itself in 2 to 3 weeks.
Yeah.
Now you get better data on your patients. You get them through there faster because you don't have to spend 25, 30 minutes collecting the images. You can get it all done. If you know what you're looking for, you can get it done in 5 or 10 minutes. But then you get real MRI grade data. So we believe that, that having that economic analysis will accelerate the sales process. So we're have 2 or 3 major health economics people we're interviewing right now, and they're giving us proposals on how they would go about generating that analysis. But it was so positive 10 years ago. I can't imagine it's not going to be even more positive now.
Yeah, I agree. Can this be part of a cardiac lab as a standalone, or is it integrated into the system?
No, we work very diligently to integrate it in the system to make sure it just fits right into the standard workflow. So basically, someone comes in to have an echocardiogram done, the sonographer, if you're in North America, have sonographers. If you're in Europe, the cardiologist does the scanning. But, they would just do the routine scanning, and then but they'd have to, have a system with the tracking on it. And then the data just goes into the same DICOM file and stored in the same PAC server that they always do. And then when they pull it down to analyze it on our workstation or on a standard workstation with our software embedded, then they can analyze it for 3D instead of just doing 2D only. And so, and again, the guidelines say they should be measuring 3D on every case. I mean, so it's not a standalone. It's meant to be integrated into the existing standard echocardiography process in hospitals or in imaging clinics or in doctors' offices. I know, a lot of, if 3 or 4 cardiologists together in an office, they usually have their own echocardiographer and their own 2D ultrasound machine and do the procedure right there in another room, and then have it available for them to review immediately before they see the patient. So that's one, that's something that's, and so we actually see, if we get a chance, if someone asks you a question about what else can you do and where's the future beyond changing conventional echocardiograms for people with heart failure or congenital heart disease or those kind of things, and then I'll sort of talk to you about all those other opportunities.
Yeah. Okay. I know you answered it, but I missed the market share for Philips and Siemens. Can you give out those numbers again? I think you mentioned that they were the...
Yeah, 42% for GE, 33 for Philips, 15 for Siemens. There are some other second-tier players like Ezerate and Samsung, Panasonic, Toshiba, Mindray all have cardiac machines, which are used somewhere. So those are mostly Europe and North American numbers. Philips has a bit more market share in Europe, and GE has a bit more market share in North America. But those are basically the numbers for where the major markets are.
Yes. And do you anticipate increased machine pricing when market adoption kicks in?
Yes, I didn't go through that, but I would see as this becomes standard of care, then I think we would be able to increase. The standard price for a 2D ultrasound machine is $350,000 for a cardiac machine. A GE E95 or a Philips Epic. So we would see actually, eventually what's going to happen here is someone's going to buy, one of those 3 guys is going to acquire us and embed all what we do into their existing system. And so then they're going to be out selling their existing system for $350,000, but it's going to be so much better than in Philips or Siemens. They're going to, or GE or whoever it is, so much better than the other 2 that they're going to garner market share. And that's the whole name of the game in this cardiac echo is market share, market share, market share.
Right.
So, that's what's going to happen. So I don't think it'll ever be, we'll sell it as a standalone device until it gets integrated. And then once it's integrated, it'll get sold as an integrated. It'll just be another function on the standard analytics package on a machine. So ideally, we'd like to, I think we're going to get acquired just because, but theoretically, I mean, we could license it to all three and the second year guys as well, and they can embed it in all of their different platforms could be embedded. That's what happened with TomTech. TomTech licensed it to everybody, and everybody started using the TomTech software for 2D analysis and then 3D analysis, and then Philips bought them and proceeded to, not upgrade the system. So for the last 4 years, everybody else except Philips has been using the system frozen in time in 2017 when TomTech was bought. And Philips has been evolving the system to make it better and better. It's still not anywhere near as good as ours, but it's the Philips analytic package is better than the other two right now because of that. So I think Philips has already shown the market that the way to have this fight is to get the best system and go out and steal market share, which is what they're doing right now.
Yeah. Can you talk about, this is 3 questions in one, but it just because I know you kind of glanced over the personnel for your company, the executive leadership. But how many employees do you have? How will you sell the units, and can customers purchase consumables elsewhere?
Okay, so we have 10 employees. That was how many points? And what was the next question? Well, I'll do the last one. They can't. No, the consumable that we have is that reference crystal. That was that little square block on the picture where the patient and the wire running back onto the tracking system. There's a reference crystal. So, what we've done in going from version 2 to version 3 was we've created this reference crystal on the patient, so the patient can move around because we're collecting information relative to where the patient is. We don't really care if the patient's upside down or backwards or whatever. As long as we know where the heart is, that's all we care about. But we have patent pending on that new tracking system. That consumable is patented. You can't buy it anywhere else. No.
Okay.
What was the third?
The third was, how will you sell units? So we know that you have a salesperson on force, and then you're trying to expand that, correct? Obviously with
so I mean, we're doing it right now by word of mouth for our key opinion leaders. Key opinion leaders have it, and they introduce us to other people. So and we talk to them and do a demo online and show them how it works, and we get a testimonial from different people, like Dr. Skinner did a few weeks ago, and that encourages people that, hey, this thing probably works, let's go do it. And no, now we're going to start doing webinars. So we're going, and I just announced this morning that we became a sponsor of the Canadian Society for Echocardiography meeting that's going to happen this weekend virtually. And on there we have, a sign-up sheet for cardiologists and sonographers to sign up for our next webinar, which will be with an expert cardiologist talking about how the system is used and doing and presenting some case studies. So, again, it's about building awareness. Once we get the alliance done, then we'll have hundreds of salespeople and who have the attention of who already are the salespeople to, thousands of cardiac centers worldwide. So at that point, we'll be training those salespeople to go and do the demo and talk about the benefits of our equipment to their already existing customers.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Let's see here. So the slide indicating 16 sites completed and 11 in process. This seemed like new information for in process, which is very exciting. Can you speak a bit about the in process sites and whether any of these were reorders from already completed sites?
Oh boy, that's a big. Well, so that's not new information. It's been on my slide set for 2 months or 3 months. Anyway. But in process. So we have, let me see. One out of those 11 is someone who's had a version 2 and is upgrading to version 3. The other 10 are new users, new customers. I think actually, no, I mean, one other one was part of our original clinical trial in pulmonary hypertension way back when. So, and he's moved institution, so he's now in a new institution, and he wants to get the machine for his new institution. Yeah. So two out of the 11 are people who've had experience with the machine. The other 9 are newbies.
Right. This is, I think, a really important question because you made an announcement recently about it. But can you talk about the status of the China market, especially with respect to COVID? I mean, that's going to be a big one once you can enter that market and get the machines out. But do you what are your thoughts on the China market and where you're at right now with that?
Well, I haven't really gotten any new information in the last 2 months from China. I put out what they gave me, which was that they are, they built out their distribution network. They have tier 1 guys signed up to them and have committed to sell a certain number of devices in the next 12 months. It's in the hundreds. So they're tier 1 distributors. The way China works, you have tier 1, there's like 10 tiers to actually get to a hospital. So it's kind of it's a multi-tier system. So you sign up the tier 1 guys, they go sign up tier 2s and tier 3s. So they're in that process. What was exciting about the Chinese opportunity is that they actually had an inquiry from a major hospital in Shanghai from the cardiologist there who had heard through that the Chinese were going to mandate that all ICUs had to have the ability to do 3D echocardiography to be able to triage people with COVID. Because one of the first things you see in the, when people go, there's a direct correlation between the size of your right ventricle and whether you're going to die or not from COVID. And so they were sort of gearing up to thinking that they would have a second wave, probably through a variant or something. And that the hospitals were being told to think about how they would gear up to do triage when they were trying to figure out which patients should be let go and which patients should continue to have some therapy in an ICU. And so he was saying he would need 3 to 10 machines to equip his ICU in Shanghai to be able to deal with the sort of capacity worst case scenario. So if that were true, 34,000 hospitals in China.
Yeah.
If they all needed 1 or 2 machines in their ICUs to deal with what China considers the possibility of having a variant form of COVID rise up and not be able to contain it, that would be an amazing order. Other than that, I mean, I think they're continuing their process. I mean, they have very good connections to the authorities in China, and they're working on bulk sales to supply hundreds of machines to different areas of China based on government purchase programs. And so they're in China. It's not, you don't go to every hospital and try and convince every cardiologist that they should use it like the way you have to do in North America and Europe. You actually go to the government and explain them the value of having this equipment, and then they buy 1 or 2 machines for hundreds or thousands of hospitals in their province. So they're in that process.
And that, I'm sure, is the reason why a joint venture made much more sense than trying to go it alone in China, of course.
Oh, yeah. Well, I said, we set up this joint venture 5 or 6 years ago. They've spent $10 million getting to where they are. They haven't actually, they've sold a couple of amendments. I think they sold the 8 machines they have installed there. But, I mean, I would not have been able to, the mind space and the cash burn on it would have been beyond my capability. Yeah. And then on top of that, I mean, it took them 4.5 years to get through the Chinese FDA, and all they did was take our data for the Canadian and US applications and submit it to the Chinese FDA. Still took them 4 years to get approval. I've talked to lots of other CEOs of companies who tried to go in there and get Chinese FDA approval for their product, their medical device product themselves, by having just a Chinese partner or a distributor partner rather than, and trying to own the license to sell. And they're still waiting for their license. So it's just not a place you go as a small company and with a regulated device without letting the local people be the lead for sure. Yeah.
Exactly. And staying on the Chinese, staying on everything with as we're talking about China, I'm going to try to take two questions and kind of condense them into one. Can you talk about what the terms are with the JV that you're working with over there, the financial terms in terms of revenue split and royalties, et cetera?
Yeah, well, in general, I guess I can. I mean, basically, we have an agreement to do a share swap for an equity share swap. We're waiting, but they're doing a financing round right now, so that'll be based on whatever the the valuation of that company. Is a private company, obviously, and so we end up with an equity position in the company, and we end up with an equity position in the holding company. So, but UTN Medical is a holding company. UTN Shanghai is a holding company, and they own 100, own the shares in UTN Medical, which is the Ventripoint piece of the puzzle. They own it, and that's built the factory in Nanshan, and build the machines in China using Chinese components and sell them in China and all that sort of stuff to get around duty issues and all sorts of other reasons for doing it that way. So we just own an equity position in basically in that. That's our joint fee, and they have that holding company has also got a number of other medical devices they're commercializing within China. So we not only own a piece of ourselves of our business over there, but we own a piece of a bunch of other businesses as well. And so once we do that share swap, so we're as our valuation goes up, they get less shares of Ventripoint, and as their valuation goes up, we get less shares of them. But ours is moving, as you saw, 600% in the last 3.5 months. Our valuation is moving a whole lot faster than theirs. So we'll be in a very good position when we trigger that, and that should be when they get their financing finished. But like all things China, you can't predict when anything's going to actually get done. So
That's right.
Could happen next week. Could be happen end of the year. Right now, they don't have a COVID. At least they claim they don't have a COVID problem. So.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're still planning for a worst case scenario.
Yeah, exactly. I've had a couple of people say that they're having trouble hearing you. So if you can maybe speak up a little bit louder when you get when you're answering.
There's a button on your machine. It's called sound. You
can if you can turn your volume up out there if you're having issues hearing, but.
Well, some people can hear me. It's clearly not me. But anyway, go ahead. Yeah.
Just for we have we have like 20 some odd questions in queue, so I'm trying to like.
We got another
rapid fire them. Just for clarification, is your alliance and distribution agreement one and the same?
Yeah, no, the alliance would be for a distribution. Yeah, for
distribution.
Or a master distribution agreement worldwide. Great. So it's we won't launch it worldwide out of the gate, but the starting point current thinking is the starting point would be with the United States. I mean, that's the largest medical market. That's where and so and once you start selling in the States, then of course everybody else buys it anyway. So it just makes sense to continually to continue to sell it into the major centers in the States and roll that out worldwide. So yeah, no, it's basically a marketing agreement. Yeah, we have a rep share. And, they sell it. The deal as we have been proposed it to them was they would sell it and support it. We would train them how to sell it and support it, and we would have a rev share at the end of the day.
Great. Let's see here.
It's pretty much a standard. It's not anything weird in the industry. It's pretty much the standard rev share you would see in this industry.
Right. Yeah. Any concept, any idea when a new higher reward billing code may be applicable?
Well, it takes 18 to 24 months to get a new one. Now there are some, because of COVID, and there are some new categories, I guess, within CMS, which allows you to apply as an innovative device. And again, that economic analysis that we're about to commission will give us the justification to go in there and ask for be coded as an innovative breakthrough device, which needs its own code. I mean, that code that's existing there, the $100 to $200 CPT code, is a general code for doing a 3D reconstruction from any 2D image set. And so, it's not specific cardiac. You don't need to do an MRI to build a 3D model of your carotid artery or your kidney or your liver or whatever. So you can do that with 2D ultrasound. So you can get paid to do that process, which is not difficult because a blood vessel is pretty much a blood vessel. But so we've been talking to reimbursement experts, so we can get our own code because we do cardiac, and cardiac's so much more difficult to do. Nobody uses that general code for doing cardiac because it would take them hours. There's no money in it, and they probably get the wrong answer anyway. So we would get our own code, but we need 3 hospitals, institutions in the United States to sponsor that and write a white paper, and we need that economic analysis. So but if we get innovation breakthrough category, then it's 6 months review as opposed to 18 to 24 months. So we're working on getting that.
Gotcha.
Does that answer the question? I hope.
Yes, absolutely. And how would an alliance affect the margin of sales? So, your margins, I mean, I'm sure they would maybe go down a little bit, obviously, because you're paying a commission or whatever, but I mean.
Our margin, it's a distribution agreement, right? So
Yeah.
it's like every distribution agreement in the world. I mean, the distributor, some of them are based on a percentage of final price. Some of them are based on a fixed transfer price. And then the distributor selling can sell it from whatever they want, right? Whatever the market will bear. I mean, in this particular case, we went to a percentage, a more standard distribution agreement, which was a percentage of the final price. So, that would be in the industry, that would be anywhere from, 20% to 40, 50%, depending on how much the distributor is going to after sales support, there's a million things you have to do when you're negotiating a distribution agreement. What happens if there's a recall? What happens if there's a client returns the product? What happens if it breaks? Who's fixing it? All that sort of stuff. So depending on how much responsibility the distributor's taking on from the OEM, and we would be the OEM in this situation, they would get more and more royalty based on picking up more and more of the risk of servicing the marketplace. Now, there's not a lot of risk for our system because we've had them out, and it's basically a computer on a stick with some software. So, and now we haven't had 5 years of experience in the field with our new tracking device. So there's, but again, it's a solid state device, circuit board with a whole lot of software. So there's no reason to believe it would break down or do anything strange. And then, so we don't anticipate a large problem surfacing the devices once they're deployed. But, that's the way that's the way all industries work. I mean, this is my 7th time around. And so we negotiated those things before. So it'll be a rev share somewhere in that range, on standard industrial range, and depending on how much responsibility they want to take on.
Yeah. And like George mentioned, he's done this before. He knows how to take a product from concept to commercialization. And you've been at it for what, like 40 plus years now?
My 7th one, I'm 6 for 6. I sold my companies to Pfizer and DuPont and Boston Scientific for hundreds of millions of dollars. And all of those products have been used 300 million times in the last 35 years to extend the life of 300 million people. So yeah, I mean, it's not magic. It's pretty straightforward. I mean, I think the challenge here is to show that you have something valuable, and we've obviously got hundreds of publications showing that what we do is correct and valuable, and now the marketplace is beginning to understand that and come our way. And COVID could be the largest application we've ever seen. I mean, if we had SARS 15 years ago, 10% of the people who got SARS still have chronic heart and lung problems and have been seen by cardiologists continuously for the last 15 years. If even 2% of everybody who gets COVID has a chronic problem, and we're seeing that now in the long haulers, they call them, with COVID, where these people have all sorts of heart, lung, kidney, liver, all sorts of problems because of the basically multiple organ failure you're seeing as a consequence of the thrombotic complications of not only the virus itself, but the immune response. So, you know, my doctorate was in thrombosis, and so
Yeah.
I'm a world expert on this. I follow this stuff. This is but you know, in terms of Ventripoint, you know, we could easily be, you know, and the cardiology world is quite concerned. We could easily overwhelm the existing echocardiography capabilities of the world with COVID patients. They could easily be double the number of scans a year, half of them being COVID and the other half being people with the other types of heart disease. So yeah, I think we're in the right place at the right time. I hope I hope that COVID isn't as bad as it appears to be, but so far it looks pretty much like SARS.
Yeah, and there are a lot of long haulers out there, unfortunately, who just continue to have issues. Does it have possible application in neurological diagnostics?
Well, the next one we would go after outside of cardiac. There's still lots of applications inside cardiac. So again, if you want to have some fun talking about other things, I'd love to do that. But you know, cancer, so solid tumors, neurological tumors in the brain would be one where you want to kind of characterize the size of that tumor and then try some basically non-invasive therapies to see if you can reduce the size, and the more accurate you are at measuring the size and measuring its change. So that's accuracy and precision, which is what we're good at. Then the sooner you can decide that therapy is not working, we got to move on to another therapy of some kind or other. And that's the kind of thing we see in pulmonary hypertension. You know, there are 3 or 4 drugs out there that work well on pulmonary hypertension, but you never know which drug works on which patient. And so, you know, you don't want to spend 3 months on a therapy that isn't working. You want to try it for a month. If it's not working, move on to the next one. So to do that, you need very accurate and reliable volumetric information. So that would be the one I could imagine, and that would be true for prostate cancer, breast cancer, liver cancer, all the same issues.
Yeah. I don't know if this is pulling back the curtain too much, but any of the big 3 players who you prefer to collaborate with? Should I just move
on? I've talked to them all, and you know, they're big companies. And, you know, they all have their own cultures. You know, obviously, you know, I don't think I'd one over the other. I think they are. Like I said, I'd like to collaborate with all 3 of them and
Yeah.
access the entire market and not a piece of it, right? So you know, I think yeah, I don't know. I'm hoping that the first alliance will stimulate the other 2 to come in and say, okay, we want to. To me, it's like a sailboat race. You know, you know, if you're leading in the sailboat race and the guy behind you tacks off to find some better wind, then you tack over with him, because the last thing you want to do is not be in the same. If you're ahead, you want to be in the same wind, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So you know, it's, to me, I would think that we get one, and the other 2 will come along, just because if it turns out there is a better wind out there, and it does turn out that the marketplace loves a system with standard diagnostics with Ventripoint embedded in it, so you can do 3D. Then they're going to lose market share big time, and they're going to lose the race. So, you know, so I would think they would want to come along as well, but we'll see.
So does from a financial standpoint, does it make more sense to do what TomTom did, where they license to everyone, as opposed to, you know, just kind of riding that wave versus selling the company? I mean, what is the best way for you to move forward in terms of that?
Oh, yeah, I think the highest value for the company, I would say, would be to license the technology, embed the technology in all 3, or even all the way down to Panasonic to Samsung technologies into their platform, so everybody have access to it. But I don't think they're going to let us do that.
Yeah.
I think it's a bit of I think from an academic perspective, if you analyzed it, you would say, yeah, having 100, getting whatever, pick a number, 40% revenue from 100% of the market is better than getting an 80% revenue from 40% of the market.
Right.
So that's really what you're asking me. And so, yeah, obviously you're better off to license to everybody and get a piece of everybody's business. But I just don't see, that's traditionally, TomTech was one of the few people who were able to do that. And then eventually they got bought anyway. So
Yeah, exactly. Trying to, let's see here, I get a handful more questions. Can this be adapted to observe AFib?
well, you don't really observe AFib. I mean, AFib is something, yeah, you can see AFib on an ECG, right? But I think there's a strong correlation between right ventricular volume and the chances of you getting AFib in the next 6 to 12 months. So a better place for what we would do in AFib would be to look at people who are at risk for AFib and characterize them based on the size of their right ventricle index, and identify those people who are higher risk and treat them, and give them some prophylactic treatment for AFib. So that's one of the clinical studies I'd like to do. And McMaster University in Hamilton did that study a few years ago, and they have all the scans, and they have all the data and the outcome data, and following their patients for a year afterwards, and we're able to show the correlation between right ventricular size as measured by a 2D measurement, not a 3D. So they would get a much better correlation if they use actual 3D volumes, which is what we have. So we'd like to go back and do that study with McMaster and look at that data set and show that we would have gotten a better answer quicker, faster than what they did. So yeah, that's the AFib study I would like to do.
Great. Let's see here. We got a bunch more. I'm just trying to get through. Ventripoint is presenting at Canadian Society of Echocardiography. In the press release, you mentioned you'll be showing current and future products. Can you elaborate on any future products?
Well, so one of the things we've been working on is a 4D solution. So now you're talking about the 3D dynamic mechanism so the fourth dimension is time, right? Obviously. Mm-hmm. But now that we have a very accurate mathematical model of the heart in both all the way through the cardiac cycle, we can now start measuring vectors, strain vectors, strain rates, not just absolute strain, but strain rates at different points in the cardiac cycle and all that kind of stuff. And so we've been working with a advisory committee of the top cardiologists in Europe and North America who've been advising us on what kind of measurements they would like to see. Now that they can do that, kind of measurements they've always wished they could get on patients. And so we'll be showing some of that to the cardiologists at the CSE and saying, does this make sense to you? Is measuring, strain rate of the back wall of the right ventricle? Do you think that's something that would be useful in characterizing the problems with certain hearts? And we'll see what they say, but at least we'll be showing them that we can measure things they've only dreamed of in the past.
And let's see here. Are there any what? Go ahead.
Filed a patent, actually. We filed a patent on that, on some of it already, and that's something we'll be announcing. Yeah.
And are there any white papers underway regarding adult studies to augment the Dr. Skinner report at this stage?
Yeah, we got a bunch of them coming. It's hard to get these cardiologists to write up these case studies, so we help them write them, but it's a process. So, yeah, we'll have a bunch more. As we said in the press release, this is the first of a series that we're going to have on the website, and we are working on on the with and without contrast type case studies, and the Stollery is still working on atrium ventricle characterizations in people, in children with heart disease, with valve disease, valvular disease. So there's a bunch of these things that are coming. Yeah.
And if anybody's interested, like Dr. Adams mentioned earlier in the webcast, if you were interested in looking at the presentation on Biopub and Dr. Skinner's remarks, just send me an email and I'll make sure that you get a copy of it. It's really great to watch. So I'm going to put these two questions together. What is the rough timeline for China to start using VMS 3.0, which I think you touched on earlier, but in how many units do you reasonably think you can sell in China?
Oh, I categorically refuse to put timelines on anything in China.
Yeah, I agree.
If you told me it was going to take us 4.5 years to get through the Chinese FDA with a fully Chinese partner, I would have said you were crazy, but that's how long it took. So, I think when they get started, they're going to be selling them in chunks of hundreds at a time.
Yeah.
And so it'll rapidly become a very nice business. I mean, part of the strategy there is for them to take that private holding company and turn it into a public company and list it on the Hong Kong Exchange, where the multiples on valuations are very attractive. And so one of the reasons I'm happy to be an equity partner in that company is that not only do I get, when they're dividend out the profits to their own shareholders in China, they have to dividend out to me because I'm in the same boat as the other shareholders in that company. So I can't play these funny royalty games that sometimes get played. And on top of that, if it does go public and becomes a very profitable, highly valued company, then I have the option to sell my shares if I want to, if I feel that that's the right thing to do. So so I never put timelines on China anymore.
Yeah, it's really hard to do, especially with everything that's going on. And one of the questions that I was getting to was, what equity stake are we expecting for the Chinese company?
Well, as I said, it's a function of our valuation and their valuation. It's going to be somewhere in the range of 10 to 20%. My best guess. Yeah.
Will the current VMS version be advanced to automatically place the reference point to the heart that currently need human input?
I'm sorry to say that question doesn't make any sense. A reference point for the tracking system is that reference dial we put just around on your collarbone here to allow us, the patient, to move around while we're collecting the images, right? So, the operator doesn't do anything with that. They just put it on and the system uses it. It calibrates and away it goes. So yeah, the operator has to do that, but they have to put the ECG lead on too. And it's just part of the exam, the process. It takes no time to put that thing on and calibrate and away you go. So is there, okay, so I guess let me go next step on that and say, we are working on a way to potentially reconstruct 2D ultrasound exams without a tracking system, just using the 16 views and taking a first best guess at where those views were taken and what we're looking at and where the dots are, and then doing some advanced AI, probably more Monte Carlo type analysis, and seeing if we can get the right answer without actually knowing precisely where that view was. And so that's a piece of research we're doing. We're working on it. We have some clinical partners now who are trying out the prototype software to see how well it works. So if we are able, so it's theoretically possible that we could, in a year from now, we could be not selling hardware at all, just selling pure software, and then you could go in and just analyze your 2D ultrasound exam using our stuff and get 3D numbers, excellent 3D numbers, without ever having a tracking system. The amazing part of that would be then that would give you the ability to go back into the archive and actually build a trend line for this patient, because you don't do that now. I mean, like, there's so much variability between one exam and the next exam, doctors do not go back and look at the one from 6 months ago or a year ago and say, what's changed? Because there's so much variability in the analysis, the way you do it in 2D now, 2D dimensional things, and so much variability from operator to operator, whoever, so much variability from machine to machine and probe to probe, that they've learned it's a waste of time to go back and look at the previous one. So they're always looking at a snapshot of what the patient's heart looks like today and deciding what to do with this patient based on, you know, symptomology and a little bit and the numbers they crunch today.
Right.
With our system, because we don't have operator variability. It doesn't matter who does the analysis, you get the same answer. And we have so much precision. It's not plus or minus 15%, it's plus or minus 3 or 4%. You can actually now go back and analyze all. So if you have an echo on a patient every year for the last 10 years, you can actually go back and analyze all those things. They're in the archive, and actually build a trend line to say exactly what's been happening with this patient over the last 10 years, which would be incredibly informative to a cardiologist to decide what to do next. So that's why we're working on that non-tracking system, if you like, and we think we can do it, but still in development. That's a long-winded answer to that question.
No, there's a lot of great information. Have you received feedback from the installs in Canada? And if so, what have they been like?
Yeah, we get feedback from all of them. They love it. They think it's great. You know, it's so much better than version 2. It's you know, they're using it for all sorts of different kinds of patients. But once again, the echo guys are all shut down. Sick kids has been turned into an adult hospital. So yeah, like people are not doing echocardiography right now in Canada. They're just not doing it.
Yeah, there's too many other things going on. What magnitude is there for vet medicine potential?
Magnitude for what?
For the veterinarian space. Yeah.
Yeah, I kind of jumped over that slide, but I mean, there are 30,000 vet practices in the United States. There are over 100 million dogs, about 10% of which have cardiac problems. Most vets don't do echocardiography on their dogs, but as you know, they're always looking for something new they can do, some kind of tool they can have to get an idea what's wrong with this animal. And so we anticipate it could be a very large market for us. There's only 25,000 cardiologists in the United States, about 2,500 echocardiographers. So 30,000 veterinary practices, probably 50,000 vets. There's twice as many vets as cardiologists. And so it could be a very large market for us. I mean, the good news is there's only a couple of major distributors who distribute products to veterinarians groups. And so as soon as we get the database data showing that we can do an accurate job doing reconstruction of canine hearts with our human heart databases, and we've done a dozen, so we're pretty confident that will work out fine. Then we'll be able to go to the distributors and say, here's a product, here's the endorsement of the North Carolina State University, and we'd like to now offer the product to veterinarians, and let's get going. So that's the plan. We're just waiting for that data set.
Perfect. Brain aneurysms, is that a potential market that you can look at in the future?
Well, I actually had a call from an old friend of mine who was in the aneurysms right now the other day asking the same question. There's no reason why we couldn't characterize aneurysms perfectly well. We have not looked at that market. I mean, I don't think whether it's an abdominal aortic aneurysm or a brain aneurysm or whatever kind of aneurysm, it's certainly, right now, they're characterized by absolute size or number of diameters of the vessel, if you're talking about neuro. So, and they know when you get to, like a AAA abdominal, you get to 3.5 centimeters maximum size in any direction, that's as far as that vessel can stretch, and the next thing's happens is going to blow, and the person is going to bleed out in under 30 seconds. So you got to go do something about that. I haven't looked into the market. It's an interesting idea. Maybe I'll talk to some of my vascular guys and see what they think.
Yeah. I think there's going to be, you'll find a lot of opportunities down the road. I think we are going, well, I actually have one more. Let's see here. This, this again is asking you to look into a crystal ball, but will the China deal, would the China deal go with the potential, okay. Will the China deal go with the potential buyout with one of the big three, or would it be spun out separately for investors? Are we getting ahead of ourselves here, or?
Oh, well, you know, like I said, I worked, I worked for a number of years. So, you know, most big companies want to own it all. They don't really
Yeah.
want some other company out there who could pollute the water or do something stupid with the product. And then all of a sudden they've spent years developing you know, a reputation for this product, to have some other company do something stupid and tarnish the reputation and damage the market, right? So I think, you know, so in talking to the big three, they haven't expressed that concern, which I've actually been surprised they haven't. But I would say China is a world unto itself, you know. I mean, Philips, GE, Siemens all sell their cardiac machines in China. They've done it through distribution networks for 20, 30 years. They're comfortable in that multi-tier environment. So I do not see that, you know, there again, I think they would just take over that opportunity as it became available.
Yeah.
Yeah. Through their existing networks.
That makes sense.
In the standard Chinese way, the Chinese people take over other Chinese companies.
Exactly. Yeah. Okay. Well, I think I don't think I've done a webinar with this many questions. So I appreciate everybody's questions. I tried to get to all of them. There were over 30, and sometimes that's, I think, the better way to do it in terms of you know, of conducting these webinars. Really gets the flow of questions going back and forth, and Q&A is great, and George is great at answering those questions. But I want to thank George for coming on today and getting us up to speed on Ventripoint's lead product and anticipated milestones. It looks like there are a lot we can look forward to as the company expands the footprint of its VMS whole heart analysis system throughout the world. And we look forward to having you on again in the future. We'll probably do another one of these. I believe we have one scheduled in the next couple of weeks. So we'll do it again at that time. So thank you, George. In the meantime, if you want any additional information, you can visit the Ventripoint Diagnostics website at www.ventripoint.com, including details on the VMS 3.0 system, as well as any additional information, press releases. Again, if anyone wants to see that video, you can, from BioPub, you can email me. My information is on the investor presentation that's on the website, and I'll be happy to send it to you. I think it's a really great video to watch. I want to thank everyone again for taking the time to get up to speed on Ventripoint Diagnostics, and I look forward to your attendance at a future podcast presentation produced by Torrey Hills Capital. Until then, everybody be safe, be well. George, thank you for your time. We appreciate it. We went a little long today, but I think we answered a lot of questions. So
You're welcome.
And we will talk to you soon.
Bye-bye.
Take care.